There is a version of Hollywood that the public never sees. Not the red carpets, not the award speeches, not the carefully crafted interviews on late-night TV. The other version, the one that operates behind closed doors, on private islands, on private jets, in rooms full of powerful people who all made the same silent agreement to never talk about what happened inside them. And for years, nobody did talk, until the documents came.
A name keeps coming up in the Epstein files that nobody saw coming. It's not a politician, not some Wall Street billionaire, someone you watched on television for nearly 20 years, someone whose whole career, their entire public identity, was built on one word.
Nearly 7 million pages of documents, FBI memos, private emails, flight logs, text messages, all of it dropped into the public domain. And within hours, people were finding names nobody expected to find. But here is the question this video is really asking. Not just who appeared in those files, but why in an industry as large, as powerful, and as publicly scrutinized as Hollywood did, almost nobody ever stand apart from that world? Almost nobody, except one man.
That guy sits on the subway by himself.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, but there's no obvious outward displays of wealth from him. I mean, he's insanely wealthy. But when you see him, he's dressed like me.
Yeah.
He's got like a regular watch on, sneakers. He's normal as man. It's real weird.
His name is Keanu Reeves, and the fact that his name does not appear in those documents in an industry where so many did is a story all by itself. The Last Good Man, where it all begins. To understand why Keanu Reeves is different, you have to go back to the beginning, not The Matrix, not Speed, not the moment he became a global icon. You have to go back to the child. Keanu's father, Samuel Reeves, was a man who struggled with substance abuse his entire adult life, in and out of prison for selling heroin. And when Keanu was just 3 years old, Samuel abandoned his family completely, left, gone, just like that. His mother, Patricia, was left alone to raise 2 children. She worked tirelessly as a costume designer, a woman who gave everything she had to keep her family afloat. She married and divorced 4 different men during Keanu's upbringing. 4 different men moving in and out of that household. 4 different father figures, none of them staying. And this is where things get interesting, because the statistics on boys who grow up without stable fathers are not kind. We know from decades of research that young men who grow up without a consistent male figure in the home are statistically more likely to develop aggressive tendencies, depressive episodes, and most significantly for this story, to repeat the same patterns of abandonment and self-destruction. The system was set up for Keanu to fail. His sister Kim described their childhood in unflinching terms. She said, and this is striking, "We never had anyone to play with us, to watch her ride horses, to watch Keanu play hockey. They were essentially raising themselves in the spaces between the revolving door of men their mother brought home. A childhood built on loss." His teachers noticed it too. They described a vague sadness that seemed to follow Keanu everywhere, like a cloud that never fully lifted. He bounced between 5 different high schools, got expelled from one for being too disruptive, which Keanu himself later described simply as getting in their way.
I was just getting in their way, I guess.
Now compare that background, that rootless, unstable, emotionally unsupported childhood, to the world Keanu was about to enter. Hollywood in the 1980s was not just a film industry. It was a power structure, an ecosystem built on who you knew, what you owed, and what you were willing to do to stay inside it. And this is where things get strange, because from the very first moment Keanu arrived in that world, he refused to play by its rules. His agents told him his name was too ethnic. This was the mid-1980s. In that industry, at that time, that kind of pressure from the people who controlled your career was not a suggestion. It was a warning. Change your name or lose opportunities. Keanu actually tried it. He went by Casey for a while. But here's the thing, when casting directors called out Casey at auditions, Keanu didn't respond. Not because he forgot, because it wasn't his name. He went back to Keanu, and his career suffered not a single consequence for it. He never changed who he was. That moment, small as it sounds, tells you everything about the man. In an industry where the first thing they do is try to reshape you, Keanu Reeves refused to be reshaped, even before he had the leverage to refuse, even when the cost of refusal was real, and the industry noticed. Casting director Carrie Fraser described the moment she first saw him walk into an audition room.
I opened the door and I went, oh my God, this is my guy. It was just because of the way he held his body. His shoes were untied, and what he was wearing looked like a young person growing into being a man.
There was something about him that couldn't be manufactured. And in Hollywood, where almost everything is manufactured, that made him both valuable and, to a certain kind of powerful person, quietly dangerous. What Hollywood actually is. Let's pause on Keanu's story for a moment, because to understand what makes him extraordinary, you first need to understand the environment he was navigating. In January 2026, the second wave of Epstein documents hit the public. public, 3.5 million additional pages. And within hours, people were pulling names, finding coded language, tracing connections that spanned not just America, but the entire world. Attorney General Pam Bondi released a list. Over 300 names, government officials, politically exposed persons, people described as having appeared somewhere anywhere in those files. And some of those names were genuinely jaw-dropping. 300 names released. But this is where things get complicated because a name appearing in those files does not automatically mean what people think it means. Some people showed up because they were mentioned in a news article that Epstein received. Some were in a media digest. Some were simply in an address book. The list threw everyone into one pile and let the public fill in the blanks themselves. That is a real and serious problem. But here is what the documents did confirm beyond any reasonable doubt. Jeffrey Epstein ran a network, a global one. Politicians, billionaires, agricultural figures from multiple countries, all orbiting around one man. And the question of who knew what remains to this day largely unanswered. The documents also revealed something else, something that has sent researchers and online communities into an extended spiral. The language buried inside those files. The coded language.
The word pizza shows up 911 times across the Epstein documents. Not in a food order, not in a lunch plan. 911 times in private emails between powerful men, written in ways that make absolutely no sense if pizza actually means pizza.
Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who personally reviewed the unedited files, confirmed publicly that the way these words were being used was not normal. She said the coded language appeared to reference minors. Forensic experts came forward saying these were almost certainly euphemisms for something far worse. And then there's the name that broke the internet more than any other connected to these files. Ellen DeGeneres. For nearly 20 years, she was the face of daytime television. Warm, funny, safe. Her entire brand built on a single phrase, "Be kind to one another." People genuinely believed it. The persona was perfect. The Ellen question. Now, to be absolutely clear about what the documents actually show. Ellen's name appears in the Epstein files. Her Twitter handle and show clips were sent to Epstein inside media digests. Articles mentioning her show appear in his records. Fact-checkers at Snopes and PolitiFact both confirmed there is no direct email between Ellen and Epstein. No evidence linking her to criminal activity in the documents. That is the factual baseline. But here is what millions of people cannot move past. It is not one fact, it is a pattern. And when you lay all the pieces next to each other, they start to look like something. November 2024, Ellen and her wife Portia quietly pack up and move to the UK. However, the media explanation she was upset about Trump winning the election. That story lasted about 48 hours before people started asking a very different question. Because then Elon Musk posted, and what he shared changed the entire conversation.
He reshared a post pointing to Ellen's 2016 birthday message to Diddy, where she publicly called him Cuddle McSnugglestuff and wrote, "You don't need to know why." Musk added one raised eyebrow emoji, nothing else. But the implication was crystal clear. She didn't leave because of Trump.
The Diddy connection. Diddy was arrested in September 2024 on trafficking and racketeering charges. Prosecutors described a system of recorded sexual abuse he called freak-offs, and video footage from Ellen's own show resurfaced Diddy sitting across from her, looking her in the eye and saying, "I invite you to all my parties." Ellen laughs, says she never goes. That clip is now being analyzed frame by frame online. Then people started looking at the people around Ellen. DJ Twitch, her show DJ, someone she publicly called family. He died by suicide in December 2022. Anne Hetche, Ellen's former girlfriend, died in a single-car crash in August 2022. Both of them gone within months of each other. Both deaths occurring right before the Diddy investigation started accelerating. People are connecting those dots loudly, and the internet is not letting it go. And then there's what former employees said about what was happening inside that show. In 2020, 36 former employees went to reporters describing a toxic, fear-driven culture, claims of harassment, misconduct, a system where nobody could safely speak up. Behind the Kindness brand, comedian Margaret Cho said on a podcast in June 2025 that Ellen had been cold and dismissive to her for decades, despite the two of them knowing each other since the 1980s. Cho said when she appeared on Ellen's show, Ellen treated her like a complete stranger, just like they had never met. So here is the question that people cannot shake. If Ellen maintained a completely fake public persona for 19 years, if she smiled and said be kind to one another every single day while her own staff was petrified of her, then what else was she hiding? Nobody has an answer, but the question itself has become impossible to ignore. The same industry, a different choice. Now let's go back to Keanu Reeves, because here is here's what makes this story so striking. Keanu was not operating in a different Hollywood. He was in the same rooms, the same studios, the same industry as everyone whose name now appears in those documents. He had every reason statistically, psychologically, circumstantially to get pulled into that world. Think about what we already established. A father who abandoned him, a childhood of instability, years of being told he wasn't enough, told to change his name, told he was a mediocre actor. By the time he hit Hollywood, Keanu Reeves was the perfect target for the kind of people who use leverage over the vulnerable. And yet, something stopped it from happening. And when you look closely at his choices, you start to understand what that something was. The Devil's Advocate, 1997, a supernatural thriller co-starring Al Pacino. Producers needed Pacino, but couldn't afford him alongside Keanu's salary. Keanu took a pay cut worth millions of dollars so that Pacino could be brought on board. He gave up his own money so the film could be better. 3 years later, the same thing. A 90% pay cut to star alongside Gene Hackman in The Replacements. Not because he had to, because he wanted to make the film work. Right? He never sold his soul. Then came Speed, 1994. By this point, Keanu was considered by many critics to be a mediocre actor. His performance in Bram Stoker's Dracula had been named on lists of the worst film performances ever recorded. His English accent became a cultural joke. He had been nominated for Worst Supporting Actor at the Razzies. His career, objectively, was on life support. This is the moment when desperate actors make desperate choices. When the people with power come to you with offers that have conditions attached. Keanu's response? He shaved his head because the director asked him to. He spent 2 months in the gym. He turned the sequel down a $12 million offer because it didn't feel right.
I wasn't against any of the artists that were involved in the project, but at the time, and I'm sure we've all had this kind of feeling sometimes when things just don't feel right, and that's how I was feeling.
He got blacklisted by a major studio for a decade. Think about that. He sacrificed his own career rather than make a film that didn't feel right to him. And then came The Matrix, and everything changed. The Matrix changes everything. The Matrix is one of the defining films of the 20th century. Will Smith turned it down, Nicolas Cage turned it down, Brad Pitt turned it down, Johnny Depp turned it down. They left it to Keanu, who trained for the role in a neck brace because he had a bulging disc in his spine that required spinal fusion surgery before filming began. He never told anyone, because if he had, they wouldn't have cast him. The film grossed over $460 million. Keanu made $14 million upfront and an additional $49 million after box office bonuses. He was, officially, one of the most successful actors in the world. And what did he do with that success? He gave 12 of his Matrix motorcycles to the stunt team. He gave each stunt performer on John Wick Chapter 4 a personalized Rolex Submariner watch worth $10,000 each. He secretly funded a cancer foundation for years before anyone found out, and when they did find out, his publicist had to clarify that the story about him donating 70% of his Matrix salary to charity was not accurate. Not because he didn't give generously, but because the actual amount he gave could not be publicly confirmed. He gave so much that people assumed the exaggerated version must be true, because it sounded like him, the man behind the legend. But the most viral moments in Keanu's public life are not the charity work. They are not the film roles. They are something far simpler. In 2011, a video of Keanu riding the New York City subway went viral. He noticed a woman carrying a heavy bag. He pointed to his seat. She sat down. He stood. 42 million views for giving up a subway seat. In 2015, he walked through an airport in a hurry, stopping to take photos with fans. Flying commercial, no bodyguards, worth $350 million. Just a man in an airport. Photos circulated for years of him hovering his hand near women's backs in photos rather than touching them. Not because someone told him to, because that's just who he is. And then there is this moment, the one that cuts through everything.
We're dropping genuine wisdom on us.
What do you think happens when we die, Keanu Reeves?
Pain that didn't break him. Because here is what Keanu Reeves was carrying while he was smiling on subway platforms and giving motorcycles to stunt coordinators. And his best friend River Phoenix died of a drug overdose in 1993, at 23 years old, outside a Hollywood nightclub, right in front of his brother, his sister, his girlfriend. His girlfriend Jennifer Syme was pregnant. They lost the baby, stillborn, 8 months in. They found out on Christmas Eve, 1999. The relationship ended. They stayed friends, were on the verge of getting back together. And then Jennifer was killed in a car accident in 2001. In the same window of time, he had lost his best friend, his child, and the woman he loved, while starring in one of the most successful film franchises places in history, carrying all of that alone, quietly, without selling the grief to tabloids, without using it as leverage for sympathy, without letting it turn him into the kind of broken person the industry tends to produce. And this is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. The industry that broke everyone else. The question this documentary is really asking is not whether Keanu Reeves is a good person. We already know the answer to that. The question is why, in an industry where the Epstein files implicate so many, where Harvey Weinstein operated for decades while everyone looked away, where R. Kelly's crimes were an open secret while radio stations kept playing his music, why did one man manage to stay untouched by all of it?
Harvey Weinstein abused women in Hollywood for decades. Everybody in the industry knew. Nobody did anything for decades. R. Kelly committed crimes against young women for years while everybody smiled and played his music on the radio. Bill Cosby was convicted. Then he walked free. Diddy's parties were an open secret for years. Everyone around him knew. Nobody said a word until it was impossible to ignore.
The answer, when you study Keanu's life carefully, seems to come down to something very specific. He never needed Hollywood's approval to feel like enough. Most of the people who get pulled into these networks, the Epstein networks, the Weinstein networks, the Diddy networks, share a common thread. They wanted something from the powerful people at the center. A role, a deal, protection, and status. Validation, the currency of access. Why he was never vulnerable to them. Keanu turned down $12 million. Because a film didn't feel right. He gave away his paycheck so that a better actor could be hired. He rode the subway alone. He ate lunch with construction workers on film sets. He didn't need the table, so nobody could offer him a seat at it in exchange for something he wasn't willing to give. And this is where the situation becomes even more significant, because this is not just about Keanu. This is about what kind of person survives Hollywood with their soul intact. Think about Justin Bieber, famous since he was 12 years old, on the Ellen DeGeneres show as a teenager, subjected to questions about his private life, his relationships, his body by one of the most powerful women in entertainment. And what did he do? He laughed along. Because what else do you do when you're sitting across from someone that powerful and that much older, and the entire world is watching? That clip, Bieber on Ellen's show, visibly uncomfortable, navigating questions no teenager should be asked, went back into circulation the moment the Epstein files dropped. Not as proof of anything specific, but as a reminder of how Hollywood treats young people who are too famous, too early, too surrounded by the wrong kind of power. What happens to young stars? Keanu was also young when he arrived in Hollywood. He was also without a father figure, without a safety net, without anyone watching out for him specifically. The difference is that by the time Hollywood got to him, he had already learned the hard way that powerful people who offer you things always want something back. His father taught him that by leaving. The generosity Keanu shows the motorcycles, the watches, the subway seats, the pay cuts, is not the generosity of a man who has everything and gives some of it away. It is the generosity of a man who understands, at a fundamental level, what it feels like to have nothing, and to have someone powerful decide your value doesn't matter. He was set up to become exactly the kind of person the Epstein network preyed upon, and he became the exact opposite of everything. While other celebrities were building brands around kindness, they didn't practice. Keanu was practicing kindness without building a brand around it. He kept his cancer foundation private for 5 years. When the story broke, he deflected the attention. When the exaggerated version of his charitable giving went viral, his own publicist corrected the record. He did not let the narrative run. Most celebrities, when they do a good deed, find a way to make sure you know about it. Keanu finds ways to make sure you don't. Why the public doesn't trust anyone anymore. Let's talk about why the Epstein files hit the way they did. Because it wasn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. It was about something that had been building for a very long time. Keanu Reeves sold nothing. And in a world where the Epstein files are still being processed, where 300 names sit in a government document, where the coded language of powerful men fills 7 million pages, where the truth of what actually happened in those rooms is still only partially visible. The existence of a man who spent 4 decades in the center of that world and came out clean is not a small thing. It is, in its own way, the most important thing. Because if one man could do it, then the rest of them had a choice, and they made it anyway.
So that the ones who love us will miss us.
His name is Keanu Reeves. He is worth $350 million. He rides the subway. He gives up his seat. He never sold his soul. In a Hollywood full of people whose names are now in government documents, his isn't. And that silence says more than any document ever could. Subscribe for more. Subscribe.